We're super excited to be here today to talk about the future of work, spatial collaboration. We'll hit on some technical foundations, show you a real-life use case of how it's being incorporated, address some of the legal frameworks, and then talk about the future. I'm Trista Pierce. I'm at Niantic Spatial now for about a year, and I've been in the XR space for a little over 4 years. I've been in enterprise the whole time, starting in the public sector. I previously was at Booz Allen Hamilton in our rapid prototyping emerging tech field, specializing in spatial computing. And the first time I was introduced to XR and the software team that was developing prototypes for the public sector, it was really an aha moment when I got into remote collaboration, different software companies, and seeing the utility that can be utilized for to save time, money, and resources. So I'm personally really excited to talk about this today because it's what kind of started my journey in this field.
Awesome, and I'm Emma Valdés. I came in through a side door, so a little bit different. I've spent the last 7 years working in ventures, so I had the opportunity to see a lot of spatial and related technologies kind of on the front lines, working with founders and seeing the impact that it could make both on the future of work and just more broadly, as Trista just alluded to. And then that curiosity turned to purpose about 3 years ago when I started doing some research around standards and just recognizing the gaps kind of as the momentum was growing around artificial intelligence and the law and standards. There were a lot of questions that I was raising in terms of digital rights and digital personhood and how all this was going to come together as we started mapping the real world. And so I started kind of asking myself, why is no one talking about this? And then I decided, well, I can. And that's what brought me here today.
Awesome. And we're talking about spatial computing not just being a hype. It's about helping teams work smarter, remotely, safely, and with context and awareness.
So in the investing world, we're very familiar with hype cycles. I'm sure everyone here has heard, the concept of timing your entrance, specifically in early stage venture, is really, really important. So we talk about strategic inflection points, and that's kind of what we're here today to talk about, whether this is a strategic inflection point, obviously, but is it just hype, or is this something greater? And Niantic believes it's something greater. So one of the important indicators that we look for in the venture space is when you see a technology, a disruptive technology, and it starts kind of transitioning from being something that's for leisure or just experimentation, and it actually becomes something that's impactful. We talk about vitamins and painkillers and this idea of something that isn't just making your life a little easier, but is solving a real critical core problem. So one question I wanted to pose was how you see spatial technology stepping into that role and transforming enterprise collaboration. And in the context of vitamins and painkillers, what are the enterprise pains that you're working to solve?
Yeah, great question. I think setting the technical foundation is where I wanted to start and how we're thinking about it from a Niantic spatial lens. And we think of our spatial services in our platform in 3 different pillars. First is capturing the 3D spatial data around you. That can be in the form of a splat, Gaussian splat for high quality visualization purposes, or in a 3D mesh. That can be used for humans and machines to utilize. This is a video of our Scaniverse app. You can see it at our booth. You can't miss it outside the door. That allows you to process those scans in 3D spaces on device. And our second pillar is localize and locate, being able to align with centimeter level accuracy and precision to the real world. That digital and physical combination is very, very powerful. We have our visual positioning system is over 1 million different locations around the world. It's been trained against 50 million neural nets, over 3 billion images. And we have a public VPS, but we also have a private VPS, which we're seeing a lot more traction with in the enterprise space and different customer bases that want to be able to own their own data and be able to localize in their own locations. And the third pillar is augment. Our Niantic SDK and computer vision stack allows you to have that seamless interaction with the digital layer into the real world. Allows objects to have persistence and semantics and occlusion so that you can really get a natural feel when working with the platform. And how is this applicable to remote collaboration? And where can this be used? And we've recently partnered with a partner that is showing in our booth as well, Sphere, to take some of the building blocks of this tech stack and integrate into their AR platform. The first video is a remote worker, field worker, wanting to fix a generator, having an issue, and within their platform, they have integrated our scanning capability to capture the asset as he's walking around it, and then process that asset on device. He's able to process it and ship it to the remote expert, who then is utilizing Magic Leap 2, can view that, annotate it, and then send it back to the in-field worker. So you can really see the power of not having a remote expert or a SME at the location and being able to do this remotely, saving time, cost, money. In a past life, I was in the Navy and I worked in the nuclear propulsion program, and I just look at this technology all the time and how much time and money we would have saved by not flying experts all around the world when issues arose. I'm sure being in the VC lens and being a lawyer in this space is a fine line, an interesting line to walk. Where do you see the biggest challenges for companies, and especially when evaluating the spatial computing lens of it? Where are some of the biggest challenges and the values when you're taking those new things and this new type of data into consideration?
Sure, so there's kind of three buckets of risk that I won't just say I look at, but kind of the courts are looking at right now, so three litigation trends, if you will. The first is data privacy and protection, then product safety and liability, and then finally intellectual property. And there's just been a lot of regulatory uncertainty. I'm sure anyone that's building or using in that space can attest to that. But really what's important from the venture perspective is the trickle-down effects of that uncertainty. So the ways that it drives business model change, the ways that it maybe adversely impacts startups, maybe more so than larger enterprises that can kind of absorb those costs, and then how it changes operations and compliance landscapes across the business sector. So touching briefly on each of those, data privacy and protection, again, this is a very quickly evolving landscape, probably the most quickly evolving landscape of the three. There's kind of a state and global patchwork situation going on. And like I mentioned, this can make compliance really difficult, while non-compliance at present is incredibly costly. And again, this is incredibly difficult, particularly for startups that don't really have this robust ecosystem or structure in place to deal with different compliance environments. When they want to work across states, or they want to work across borders, and there's different laws that are applying, it can be really difficult. And unfortunately, as a lawyer advising startups, what you would say is typically you want to look at the most strict environment, and you want to comply there, and then you're kind of safe across the board. But if you talk to anyone down in Silicon Valley, it's that's not really the best way to achieve at least the fastest or maybe even the best innovation, right? So, we're as lawyers saying, comply with the strictest, but on the other hand, we don't want to slow the pace of progress. And so that can be really difficult to look at on that end. The other piece is, on the global lens. So the EU Cybersecurity Resilience Act is one that's top of mind because there's been a whole lot of chatter amongst lawyers lately about the different things that it's imposed. And one of the things that it's imposed is something called privacy by default. And this is kind of an outstretch of what we've probably all sort of heard mumbling around in the standard space, privacy by design. But essentially taking that concept and really writing it into law. And as, again, a lawyer working with in-house founders and with small teams that are trying to work cross-border and are just trying to get really great products into the hands of the consumer or to the enterprise, that can be really frustrating because it brings down this concept that we want to build from a place of privacy, but also now it's not optional, and so that can be a hard thing to jump into. And on the state side, the same deal. 93 bills were introduced last year across 46 states, I believe, around AI legislation. 18 of those that were passed were in the state of California. So if you're working in California and then opposite coast where I am in DC, again, you're really at a disadvantage trying to keep track of all these laws as one in-house counsel. Very quickly to touch on the other two, product safety and liability. This is especially important for industrial and manufacturing use cases, which Niantic is obviously diving headfirst into. The quality and reliability are really the things that are really critical here. So when you're guiding physical movements, you really have to be thinking about people running into each other or misstepping or reaching for something that isn't there and injuring themselves. And this really raises the standard from a venture perspective of the minimum viable product. There's, again, quality, reliability is important. It also is kind of creating this environment where partnerships with time-tested, strategic, high-quality product leaders that already have an established presence and know how to use these technologies is becoming very important and something to encourage. We're also seeing that across the private and public sector, the same sort of thing. But it makes industry leaders like Niantic and like other companies that kind of have experience in this space a really critical part of moving the entire ecosystem forward. And the last piece is intellectual property, just lack of clarity around ownership, around unintentional infringement, and specifically, again, for startups, inadequate protections for the core technologies that they're building just because there's so much uncertainty around how to protect them. And the litigation crackdown has been particularly stressful here because we've seen things on the AI side, like algorithmic disgorgement as a penalty. And when you're talking about a small company, having to give up your algorithm can be a company killer. And so not really understanding the landscape there can be really difficult for companies that are trying to navigate this. Also, of course, reputation risk and everything else that goes along with the potential of litigation.
And transparency is really important. I'm glad you hit on that. What do you see the best companies doing to navigate this space appropriately?
Sure. So I have 4 main things. So the first is just designing with compliance in mind. So as I mentioned before, not all regulation is created equal, but they do kind of align on the same sort of values. And so if you can really tap into those values, it's not just a reputational discussion anymore. We're showing, we're privacy first, we're ethics first, but it's really becoming a business edge. We're finding that, especially as in the current venture environment, there's record dry powder, but after the AI revolution burned a lot of investors, you're seeing really precise dollar allocation. And because of that, you're seeing a lot of startups that are trying to either partner on government contracts or seek government grants and funding in order to supplement what used to be venture dollars. And so in that sort of environment, things like the cyber trust mark that we heard about in the past, things like having a compliance first mentality as a company really gives you an edge where you can kind of immediately partner with these higher regulated industries like the government or the military or moving into the healthcare sector or other more regulated spaces without having to fully pivot your business model. And so it really sets you up for success. The second one is just having a human-first business model. Again, this is kind of building on the concept of trust, but in the impact space, you've probably heard this for a long time, the idea of stakeholders over shareholders in your order of priorities. This is also necessary in a disruptive field like AI because this brings a lot of fear and skepticism, right? When you're talking about AI and AR and mapping and, there's a lot of talk out there about, is this both going to take my job, but also is it, spying on me and what's going on? And so quelling that fear through an environment that's built on trust, that, you're building with the stakeholder in mind is really important, both for branding, but also for compliance. Because as I mentioned before, the EU particularly has, always had this human rights first mentality, but now we're seeing it really codified into law. And so when these small companies are having to comply with things like the Cyber Resilience Act and others, the EU Act, other acts that are being passed in Europe, then you're kind of already positioned, right, to comply with those laws because you've been designing with humans in mind. The last thing I'll mention is building with innovation in innovation forward environments. And so the US obviously, would be the first that I would, throw out there in terms of innovation forward, but there's many environments across the globe that are working to kind of advance technology faster than they're trying to squash it. I think there is a lot of uncertainty still, and we are still working to regulate these technologies as ethically and as quick as we can, but the idea of it being a partnership where, rather than strict regulation that puts companies at disadvantages and threatens disgorgement and other strict penalties, the government, wanting to come in and hold hands with Silicon Valley innovators and really give standards and guidelines and frameworks rather than these harsh lines is really important, and it's what's, in my opinion, differentiated the United States for a really long time in the tech space. And so, seeing that companies are building in those spaces is obviously a green flag, but then more importantly, where there is uncertainty or a plan to pivot into a more highly regulated environment, having proactive and achievable plans for those pivots is really critical to see. So, excellent companies put their focus on the future. That's kind of the last bit here. And so, they allocate their best resources to opportunities, not problems. And so I, don't want this to be all doomsday. I do want to reinforce that although there are problems that are going on, at the end of the day, if you build with risk in mind and you don't let those risks become roadblocks, if you're agile, then you'll survive this environment. So speaking of agility, Niantic is no stranger to having to pivot business models and deal with different topics in this area, having recently transitioned from fully consumer product into the enterprise space. So having been a part of that pivot, can you discuss the mindset shift that went around this concept of moving from individual to enterprise privacy, the concerns around that, and the particular business objectives?
Yeah, of course. Well, hopefully we're doing all four of those that you mentioned, and it is definitely a mind shift change. As a location-based mobile gaming company for years, we are no strangers to the GDPR rules and the EU AI Act, and we hold privacy very near and dear to our hearts. The data being collected is the data that we have obtained and kept, so it's very important from the consumer aspect. But now looking in the enterprise space, different companies have new due diligence in areas that we haven't necessarily tapped into yet, but are heading in that direction. So finding those partners that operate in those highly regulated fields that are under those compliance so that we can make sure that we're following those best practices and kind of work harmoniously together to bring innovation forward and without having to pivot, like you mentioned, is something that we definitely are looking for and successfully doing. It's been a very exciting space, and I definitely agree that the Leadership Immersive Act of 2024 is a positive thing. The industry is seeing the need for the infrastructure to change to support XR use cases and collaboration, and if we get this right, spatial computing can scale. And if we don't, it could be very critical, but we're aiming towards the infrastructure so that we can expand it broadly.
Fully agree. And I'll add, especially coming out of the AI wave and everything we saw there, lots of venture dollars being burned, lots of companies that, had money thrown at them and then, sold to a larger company within a year. So we saw a lot of early exits, a lot of companies that didn't succeed. And so I think from the venture perspective, as you see markets with low entry barriers, you see this pattern of, once the company becomes profitable, competitors just flock the market. You see that with like Casper and, the mattress in a box idea from formation to IPO. By the time they got to IPO, there were 10 other companies in the space, right? And so that was AI. And then, coming out of AI now with the democratized access to AI, it's great in a lot of ways because it drives innovation. It allows, lower barriers for people with great ideas to build. But I think as an investor and as those that are looking in the space trying to predict what's coming next, it does kind of raise those alarms again and have us asking for, I guess, proof that spatial will go beyond the hype and actually be one of these technologies that really changes the future. And so with that in mind, and all we've discussed today and that you've witnessed in the industry, where do you see the most untapped potential and maybe also the underappreciated risks in spatial and enterprise over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's a super exciting time for all of us to be in this space. As we heard in the keynotes earlier, the convergence of XR and AI is going to be very powerful, and many enabling companies are doing that, having that in mind. I've always said that AR is AI, and when you can really merge computer vision with these technologies together and all these enablers, you can start to understand the world around you better. I don't want to steal my CTO's thunder. He is doing a keynote tomorrow to discuss our large geospatial model that we have talked about strategically pivoting to for the future. And similarly, the way that LLMs understand text, the LGM is to be used for contextual awareness and really capture this 3D data and untap new use cases that haven't been at scale yet. I'll just highlight on one that I'm personally excited about is just the semantic understanding and bringing this data in to identify different objects. You could think about change detections, insurance companies, AEC, how this could really accelerate that innovative path. And when we see all the enablers in the ecosystem coming together from 5G, next G, whatever G we're on right now, the different chips and the chip war going on, spatial sensors, when you throw in audio, that convergence is just going to bring everyone together along for the ride. And I guess that would also be the risk, is the enablers in the space falling behind, because I'm sure many of you who have been in the XR space for a long time have been burned by different hardware and software and connectivity and processing lags. So I'm really excited to see that forward, and I think that we'll get it right.
Awesome.
Well, I'm sure you could find both of us on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Thank you all.